Hey everybody, I'm Tyler Martinolich, and sitting shotgun with me today is Jesse Brock, the PR manager. How are you, Jesse?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. This is our inaugural episode of Loose Framing Podcast, which is new to us and new to you as our audience. How are you feeling about this?
I'm feeling very excited. This is our first episode coming up is with the cast of The Conjuring 3.
Yeah.
The devil made me do it.
We might have called in some favors. Some local actors who are well known to most people. I think if you follow the Conjuring universe, and certainly if you live here in Tampa Bay, you're going to recognize them later on. But that's going to be our first guest, and that's sort of the format of this podcast going forward. Is you're going to get some banter, some news from us at the head and the tail. But the meat of our podcast is going to be great interviews, we hope at least, with local production companies, local filmmakers. People who are tangentially related to the film industry, just really getting some good insight into how things work behind sets, some fun stories,
some in-depth knowledge that you're only going to listen to and find here.
Yeah,
you know how to get cast. Tampa Bay actors getting cast in Hollywood films. I mean, it can happen.
It can and does happen. We're not so far removed at this day and age from Hollywood as people might think. And I think if anything the pandemic has taught us is that the world is a very small place, especially when you start thinking about, video and Zoom and conference calling. Obviously, it's always value to be able to be in person with somebody like we are today, which I'm thankful for. But you don't have to live in LA or New York to be successful in film. People are doing it every day of the year here in Tampa Bay and throughout the entire region in Florida. So we're really excited about this podcast. I'm a huge paranormal fan. Do you like paranormal movies?
I get a little squeamish, a little jumpy, but I suffer through it.
So I'm obnoxious about it. My wife can tell you this. I spend 80% of my TV viewing time watching really bad ghost hunting shows. I subscribe to everything from like Shudder, Travel, Discovery Plus, like everything that has like Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures or the Ghost Bros, which I totally recommend. Watch the Ghost Bros, or like The Haunting. Like I consume this ad nauseum, so it was really cool.
I will say I love a good haunting story.
They're
a haunted
fun.
house, haunted location, ghosts. I love that.
Well, we might get into some ghost stories later on with our guests, so I'm looking forward to that. But how this is going to work, everybody, if you're tuning in for the first time, is this is going to be a monthly podcast. We hope you join us on our journey. We'll get the release schedule out probably by the time you're hearing this.
Yep.
So you'll know what's coming up. But we're very excited about this. We've been doing our newsletter and podcast, or I should say you have, since you've been driving that train.
Yes, I have.
For the last 2 years, and we've been pretty successful at it.
Really successful. I mean, our feedback is really great, and our numbers are growing, and our reach is growing, and we have a lot of people reaching out to us wanting to be featured.
Yeah, and I was a little worried because, it's kind of obnoxious. Everyone's got a podcast these days. But we really do leave a lot on the editor room floor when we're interviewing our guests.
When we interview these people, we're talking to them for an hour sometimes. And if you follow along with our Spotlight series, our videos are only 3-4 minutes long. So there is a ton of on-set stories, behind-the-scenes stories, tips,
Yeah, and so this is our answer to that. How do we get use of all the wisdom that we're being told in these conversations we're having without leaving on the cutting room floor? That podcast seems like a pretty good idea. So here we are, Loose Framing Podcast, episode 1. We thank you guys for joining us. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be here with our guests from The Conjuring 3. So stick around. Welcome back, everybody. Joining us now, stars of stage, screen, and runway, actors Eugenie Bondurant and Paul Wilson. Their latest film, The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It, can be seen in theaters and HBO Max starting June 4th. We'll get to that and more. But first, welcome, guys. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank you.
it. It is nice just having like human contact in a room, being across from someone.
Yeah, I got the shot.
So did I.
Bow,
We're all
bow, bow
vaccinated.
in the shot.
But yeah, it has been a long, strange year. And speaking of, as they say, sometimes it's a long, strange journey. I think today, just by coincidence, it is the 2-year anniversary of the table read that you guys did for The Conjuring 3.
Oh, wow. That's so smart of you to actually bring that up. Because, yes, I think we were driving up to Atlanta.
Absolutely.
For the table read, where we first met everybody, the director and the team and all the other, pals that we had this incredible opportunity to work with.
It was fun. And here we are sitting at a table doing a table read. I think it's pretty apropos. It was fun. That was a fun day, don't you think?
That was, yeah. Because then we heard it live, right?
Yeah.
Because we kind of knew this was interesting and special, but then to kind of hear, with Patrick and with Vera and all the other voices and tones and all the other artists around us, and then I had our producers and David McClintock, I believe, who sat there in the back and no one knew he was there.
Yeah.
He wrote all the dialogue, so he could actually hear it.
Yes.
And then it was like, yeah, nah. Or that's the fun part of the beginning, because then you walk out as an actor and go, whew, that's 2 hours. Wow.
Yeah.
Or that's almost 2 hours.
And I don't know about you. You probably got the script in ahead of time. I only had my sides. I didn't have an opportunity to read the script because I didn't get it. I was never sent the script.
I wasn't
So it was
allowed
my
to do
first
that.
time
Yeah.
hearing it.
And is
I'm
that done
like,
because
oh my
they don't want the
goodness.
cast spoiling anything before
Well,
the
I
filming
mean,
begins?
I think it's because, with this giant $1.6 billion franchise, in a lot of ways, and I heard this from a producer friend of mine, that even Dame Judi Dench just wants to read her story, her sides within the frame, and kind of go, let me lock in on that. So when the script arrived, it was like, here's your script. We'll take your script.
Yes.
And that was kind of I really want to read it again. And we couldn't do that. Yeah. But you had to kind of remember the moment, because part of, I think, the real, let's say, one of the wonderful, dynamics and elements of this entire story is there's a lot of movement here. And where you don't have a lot of talking, you get a lot of movement. You got a lot of action. Yeah. And that's kind of the hallmark of James Wan. And Shops.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, Eugenie, you've acted across from Jennifer Lawrence in The Hunger Games, which is
Yes.
just a mega hit, it's a cultural phenomenon, right?
Yes.
I think you can say the same thing about The Conjuring 3 at this point. I mean, it's more than just a horror franchise. It is a cinematic universe. It is massive. Do you have that weight in the back of your mind when you're approaching your characters? And same question to you here in a second, Paul. When you think about, like, okay, I'm joining something that's so much larger than just one movie. I mean, do you have the weight of the other films that preceded this?
I don't know properly how to answer you, because if I started getting stressed over, oh my gosh, then I would be stressed, and that would reflect in my performance. I have to identify who am I, take my story out, similar to Dame Judi Dench, and really figure out what's happening here. But the weight of the fact that this is a fully fleshed story that has a history that doesn't weigh heavy on my mind. It enriches the story. So we've got, this is the story of this couple, really, the journey of this couple and what they're doing in their life. In each generation, we're seeing a different story. So for me, it was very interesting to see how it all plays out.
And how about you, Paul? Did you think about that? I mean, you've been living this because your brother's been a key part of it since the beginning.
I'm not sure about living it is the actual gerund that I would use. But it is interesting to see, not interesting, but as a fan, I mean, my favorite actor is my brother. And to see Patrick and Vera really build this, story that began as kind of into a franchise that they've done so extremely well at with, this great team that, by the way, we just populated that world.
Yeah.
It was just such a luxury to be a part of that world. Yes. And, I have the ability to just kind of look at it not just as a proud big brother, but then, of course, with this movie, and I'm, if you blink, you might miss me. But just to be a part of the world of shooting, and the team and the producers are the same. And of course, the entire gestation of the entire product, it's the same team. They view it. I loved it when the producers, Peter Safran was like, you're part of the family, and like that's a luxury as an actor. Wherever you are in the world, to be a part of something like that. So to see kind of where I could fit and augment or help or just kind of, postulate a certain moment, it was just so much fun and, something that will, as they say, they never unmake movies. Yeah. So it's fun to be able to be a part of this.
Can I just add a correction here? Paul doesn't just blink, you miss me in this film. He has a substantial role in this film. I just want to go on record by saying that, okay? So credit where credit is due, buddy.
And so this is my buddy who, is also selling herself short because she's the MacGuffin. By the way, she's the secret weapon.
Who, me?
That, by the way, this movie we shot basically 2 years ago, starting in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But here's a really wonderful kind of reality that I think we have a better product, is that after the movie was done, which should have been delivered, all things considered, by September of 2019, because we were shooting and done, and they were assembling the movie in July of 2019. So we thought we had a September release. Then it went to an audience, a test audience. And then they were like, we need more of her.
Yeah.
So we have a better movie. So don't let her sell herself short. I won't.
No, this is a fascinating story. So, I mean, I think most films go through at least some sort of either internal or a public test screening to get some feedback. But it's super unusual to have all of this time for people to sit and think about it, to mull over the edit, and then to have positive feedback, particularly for you, about your character. That's got to be flattering.
It was very flattering.
And
especially from Shavs, who's great. I mean, such a fun director.
And what was it like getting the call saying, we want more of you, and not only that, we need to reshoot with you?
Well, first of all, when you get a call from the director and it has, or an email first that says, hi, I want to, set up a time to talk with you. And at first I'm thinking, oh no. And I'm just getting to be this big, which really is pretty much based on the fact that I'm 6'1". So then he calls, and I'm immediately jumping because it's the director of a huge film, part of this huge thing. And he says, well, we did a test run, and basically they want to see more Eugenie, which, how do you say, well, thank you, Shavs? I mean, just pick my chin off the floor. It was very kind, very, very nice thing to say.
So you were in a previous horror movie earlier this year, Fear of Rain.
Yes.
You were also
shot here in Tampa Bay.
Which we're going to get to Tampa Bay and all things Tampa Bay here in a little bit. But we had a premiere here locally, and you couldn't actually be at your own premiere.
Correct.
Because you were actually filming more scenes for The Conjuring 3. So what was it like going back and having to film during the middle of a pandemic?
Oh, now that was interesting. Two things I want to mention. Number one, going back and seeing my family. I feel like they are my family. I just, it was a wonderful experience, and it was very tight. It was a tightly run ship and no room for error. I mean, we had a lot of coverage to do, and I say there were a lot of us doing that. And number two, filming in the middle of a pandemic is interesting. You're tested every day. Everyone is tested. The assumption is that you don't go out. You are pretty much quarantined, and no one comes in to see you, and that's the way it is. And you're set in a tent on the soundstage, and if you move, there is a PA saying, hi, what can I do for you? Where can I go? Where do you want to go? Where are you going? What do you need? Anything? Yeah. Do you need anything? I will get it for you. Which normally we go up to craft service and we do our own thing, and they nod and they know where you're going. But in this case, I mean, they would deliver me outside. Then the AD, the second AD from outside, would deliver me to my trailer. You are assigned to go to your trailer. You don't move. You don't do anything. You don't go into wardrobe. You don't go into hair and makeup. Which, by the way, hair and makeup, it's so vastly different and so much more expensive to do this. I was feeling so bad for these producers, but you had to separate in hair and makeup. So hair was in a different trailer, makeup was in a different trailer. For most people who don't know this, usually you're all together. And Paul and I have fun experiences, fun memories of hanging out and the hair and makeup trailer, and everybody's talking and gabbing and everything else. But in this case, you've got a double wide trailer that is only makeup, that only has 4 stations that are partitioned off with plastic, that are cleaned after every person comes in. The makeup person who was in charge of my makeup did mine, and I think one of my stunt doubles. And I had 2 stunt doubles, believe it or not. So, yeah, it was really interesting. The hair person different.
Did that twist your headspace at all? Just the isolation and the weirdness of the day?
At first, it was a little unusual, yes, but you get used to it, and you still see the same people. It's just the attention. It's more. There's more attention on the principal actors. Actually, everyone, from background to stand-ins to whoever is part of that first unit of people that are going. First unit meaning not our term for first unit, but that core group that is going to set and working. It was really interesting. It was fun, but
it's definitely been a long, strange year.
Yeah.
So, Paul, help us out here. I think we've done a disservice in selling what The Conjuring 3 is about. Obviously, the Conjuring series is very well known. Ed and Lorraine Warren, famous paranormal investigators, based off of their stories. I think it's fair to say the first 2 movies were haunted house films, and I don't mean that in a pejorative term. In fact, I think James Wan really reinvented the idea of what a haunted house movie could be. But this is the first one in the franchise, and I think really one of the first horror movies in a long time that's sort of taken it out of a space and put it into a broader world. So give us the Cliff Notes on what this one's about.
Cliff Notes. Yeah. So I think, you're right. What's really kind of admirable and really aspiring, I should say ambitious, that they've done so well is take what was a conventional, not to sell it short, but kind of a conventional, I mean, this is the only couple, the non-clergy couple ever. No one else that were non-clergy anointed by the papacy in Rome to perform exorcisms. So that was them, and one of their first was the so-called Amityville Horror House.
Yeah.
So in this story, which is, I think, for us, and all of us that are involved, and I hope the audience at large gets this, is the very first case in history, American history, where an alleged murderer who's accused of stabbing somebody 19 times, which happens to play my daughter's boyfriend, which is like every dad's worst nightmare. And his defense is it wasn't murder, it was manslaughter. And the devil made me do it. It was a book, 1981. It occurred. It was the very first law case in Connecticut where a demonic possession was used as a defense for a murder. Yeah. Very first case. So, and there's a lot about that. And the Glotzel family, I play Carl Glotzel, and the Glotzel family called Ed and Lorraine Warren and said, my son's acting kind of weird. Not sure why. And that was David, played by the great, wonderful little Julian Hilliard, who, if you've seen
WandaVision,
yes,
the great Julian, who really has done so much, and such great work since. I still can't believe it's 2 years ago.
I know.
Well, then he, more or less, through the exorcism of the first scene in the movie, first sequence. I call Ed and Lorraine, and then they perform this exorcism. Then the demon, spirit, leaves Julian, David is the character he plays, and goes into Arnie Johnson. And this is when the story follows this very real arc of this very first murder case.
So as an actor, this is a horrible event that actually took place and happened.
That really affected real people, by the way.
Yeah. Very, very real people in a very real way. And it was a very public trial. And not only the people that were surrounding, but the people following. I mean, this is pre-OJ, right? I mean, this isn't court TV.
This is 1981.
This is people picking up the newspaper, following the story. They're seeing it on the news in limited ways. What is it like as an actor knowing that you're inhabiting, even in a fictitious way, or at least a hyperbolized way, a real person that suffered real trauma? I mean, do you think about that? Do you do research into that?
Well, for me, having done this a couple times, I try to get as much wide understanding as I can about really what was chronicled, and then kind of get a sense of who that person was.
Yeah.
And then kind of go, oh, this guy was a dad, and this guy had a little kid, And this guy was a working stiff. And by the way, it was 1980s, 81, and it's all he could do. And I think from a cultural standpoint, the male of the house at the time, was gone 8 to 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
So would come home and go, what? So I kind of saw that, and we knew that about him, that he was a long day, first shifter worker. So it was like, and he worked in the electrical business or worked in engineering. So it was like, that gives you a certain proclivity of like, this guy's kind of maybe this or this.
Yeah.
But make him a dad, like dads or moms that have kids, and it's like, what does that feel like? And then how is that struggle real?
Yeah.
Because dads, for the most part, mom and dads are the superheroes of the household, and they can't solve this. They had to call Ed and Lorraine Warren. These guys did that.
Yeah.
So the great Charlene Moa, who played my wife, we had to deal with the impact of our 11-year-old son could be possessed.
Yeah. Which shows you how
do we deal with that?
The end of the rope they had to have been to make that leap to call
them
to paranormal investigators. I mean,
6 priests, by the way,
Yeah.
showed up with them. There's a lot of debate about and the Glotzel family, and respectfully said, there's a lot of different stories here. But 6 priests came in with Ed and Lorraine to say, must have been some level of this.
Yeah.
By the way, this guy really existed, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, and it was the jury believed him. His charge was reduced from murder to manslaughter. He served 5 years and married Debbie Glotzel, who's my daughter in the movie. Debbie, sadly, the real Debbie, just died about a month or so ago.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so these people lived with that into their mid to late 60s.
which is just amazing.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
To carry that on. So
usually a transition to you, you're playing the enigmatic occultist. And I have a feeling if I ask too many questions, it'll begin into spoiler territory, so I won't do that.
Right.
But what can you tell us about the character you're playing, if anything?
Oh, gee, that's tough. Okay. There's a lot I could tell you, but
Watch the movie.
what can you tell us now?
all right. So it is the character that I'm playing is someone which is a deviation from the traditional Conjuring films. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that. After that, let's see. I also, interesting that you mentioned this, she has a history as well that we may or may not see, that you may or may not see in the story.
With people that have been in these movies
created.
before.
Yeah.
Let's say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
I think it was a good hint.
but I can't really divulge much about that. Otherwise, I give
A
up.
lot is
about the thing.
revealed
Yes.
in this movie that may have, like a caterpillar, kind of crawled through the first two and went, "Why is that? This?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this hovering over these people emotionally or
Yes.
physically?"
Yeah.
And a lot of it's revealed with
All
her.
right. Well, for those who have been following this series, and I know I have,
Go watch the first two.
I think I know what you're hinting at. So
Go watch
the
the first
audience
two.
will too.
I know.
Um,
I will say this. Watching the first two series, right? So when I went into this, I thought, oh, this is going to be so much fun. But horror movies really scare me. And I was, oh my gosh, I'm in a horror movie. And I just
you read my
finished.
mind because it's the perfect segue to my next question.
Oh, okay.
Do you watch a lot of horror movies?
No. I have to have. Well, now I'm able to do it if my husband watches it first and then he says, "Oh no, usually it's okay." Oddly enough, I saw The Nun on my own without realizing what it was, and I went, "Oh yeah." Oh, you know what? I think
It's a
that's
good
a horror
Catholic
movie.
film.
Yeah, it's a really good film. I enjoyed that actually, and it was late, and it was dark outside, and Paul was not home. My husband is named Paul as well, not this Paul. So just to clarify things. Anyway, so Paul, my husband, said, "No, you've got to watch these films. You've got to watch these films. Come on, let's sit down. Let's sit down. We'll do palate cleanser afterwards," which is my way of clearing my brain. I'm not having nightmares after.
So in the context of a horror movie, what scares you? What's the boogeyman?
The jump cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are a lot of them in this. Yeah. Yeah, I had to do some voice while we were filming. When we went back, I was asked to do, I didn't have to, but I was asked to do some voiceover for some of the scenes. And so I thought, yeah, sure, of course. Yes, anything. Yes. So Shavs brings me into his office and they're on a break. They're setting up the lights. And he said, okay, it was the end of my day. He said, we're going to show you these scenes and all I want is for you to do X, Y, and Z. I don't want to tell you what it is, but you're going to do the voiceover as blah, 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 blah. Great. So I'm going to show you the scene first. Fabulous. Right? And I think you were in it. Actually, I think I called you like, have you seen this scene yet?
Yes, you did. Yes.
And I'm sitting there and I go, within 2 seconds, sitting, holding on to my chair going, okay. And then here comes another one. And then here comes another one. Yeah.
Well, I think it's a good sign if you're still scared from the movie you're actually in. It's a good indication the audience are going to have a good time. Paul, what scares you in horror movies?
Ooh, well, I think, not to sound like, the ultimate parochial type, but anything with the devil and bad stuff, I think, rattles everybody's cage wherever you are spiritually. We had, let's see if I can do this in a very innocuous way, but we had in the early part of the movie that I think, hopefully everyone sees, once I get stabbed, it's upstairs as we go to kind of release Julian, who plays David. Yeah. David is my son, the character's name, from this kind of, possession. And then it turns into the, put him on the table and Father Gordon shows up, the great Steve Coulter, and they perform this rock and roll, crazy, just riotous exorcism. And it's plates flying and, it's just chaos. It's wonderful. As wonderful as the exorcism might be. So meanwhile, in the sequence of the story, I'm upstairs bleeding. I get stabbed, he stabs me in the thigh, and then Charlene, my wife, Judy plays Judy, takes me downstairs. Well, so we're out of the scene. So then we sneak over to Video Village, which is the director's monitor and producer's spot, and now we're watching the exorcism, and then we see a contortionist show up. And do a back bend. And we're now no longer actors in the scene.
Yeah.
We're watching the scene as like, what? What? That's real? That just happened? And in fact, I've actually heard that some of the first audience that saw that went, it's fake. I'm telling you.
That is a real person doing a
real back end from a real contortionist, and it's extremely scary.
Yeah, as someone who's not very flexible, that just terrifies me.
Oh, well, it's nothing against those wonderful people, but it's not even the athleticism that I'm reacting to. It's in the context of the story, when you see it like that, that's scary.
Yeah.
Because something's not normal.
So speaking of not normal, I think there's whether it's an urban legend or just the presence of a horror movie has with the sets and the story itself and the cast and crew. There's always a lot of paranormal or ghost stories that surround horror movies. Famously Poltergeist and Exorcist, the crews told stories for years. I'm just curious, did you guys have any paranormal experiences while on set?
Do you want to go? Oh, okay, I'll go first. I did not. And oddly, thank goodness, knock on wood, knock on whatever I see. But I did not. And I think the reason why is because there was a bishop, wonderful bishop who came, Brian Alouette, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Anyway, who came and blessed the set. I'm hoping it's because of that. Wonderful man, came with his nuns and they blessed the set, And then when I was filming the majority of my work, and going on to my set, I was asked by the producers and the on-set publicist, would you like, for Brian to come back? Yes. Would you like him to bless the set? Yes. Would you like him to bless? Yes. He didn't even have to finish. So he was there a lot. And so everything that I did, I felt like I would hand it off to him in regards to anything evil, anything harboring, whatever that was. So fortunately for us, and gratefully, I'm very grateful, I didn't see anything strange or odd happen.
I have to imagine that was a practice that was probably on the other movies too. I mean, you weren't part of those, but it seems like something that Lorraine Warren, who was alive for the first film, would have insisted on, since this is actually.
And I don't know if
something
she
that
actually
happened.
saw this last one, but she only passed away. Well, she passed away right before we shot.
Yeah, 2 years ago, 3 years.
So she obviously knew the story we were about to tell of the Devil in Connecticut, which obviously she was part of. I can say for me, yes, there were issues.
Seriously.
And it was, and by the way, probably because I miss the blessing of the set. But when the parting gift for actors that work on a movie is holy water,
Yes.
pay attention.
Yeah, that gets into your brain.
So for my first shot, which is the opening, well, I should say it's when the Glatzel family arrives at the house, and we move in, and I think it's told in retrospect. So you see the sequence of the family moves in, and son runs in, and it's this great kind of camera crane shot where they follow Julian in, and he goes inside. Well, we shot this. The exterior of the house was used in Fried Green Tomatoes in Sonoya, where they shoot a lot of great movies, and Walking Dead was shot there. And so, but it's, July in Atlanta is like May, June, and July in Tampa. So it was really hot. And so we're standing outside waiting for, the action. And I remember saying to Julian, because Shavs walked over and said, you got to get him in there in 10 seconds. So he takes unpacks the 1970 Challenger or Charger, whatever my vintage car was that I really wanted to keep, and take it, run inside, because we're moving in the house. It's the move-in day. And so he does it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, okay. So I'm like, Julian, what's your favorite, toy? Legos. Great. It's full of Legos. Run in there and get it in. So he's like, great. We practice it. Great. Awesome. Rehearse again. By the way, about 85 people behind us on camera. 2 cameras. One on an 80-foot jib crane. And ready? Okay, we got it. Ready, and action. Boom! Compressor blows up. On the first shot at the house that the possessed family moves into. Then we found out that the grandmother of the house died a week before us. And then we go into the house on a makeup change because, we're just like paint flying off our faces. And we're sitting in the foyer. And we were trying to stay in just certain parts of the house. They were very accommodating and wonderful and generous to let us even shoot inside, which we really didn't shoot inside, but we just kind of staged in the foyer. And we're sitting there hanging out, looking at our scripts, and everyone's in their chairs, getting all this. And all of a sudden, production associate walks out. I'm like, what's wrong with you? She's like, that light just turned on. Don't go in that room. And I went, what room? Opens the door and like, the light's not plugged in. What are you talking about? Do not go in that room. And she closed the door. That's real. That happened. So that's my experience.
I'd say that's a pretty good one. I've been on enough creepy sets living in Savannah.
You just got to be aware.
Weird things happen.
You got to be aware. Yeah.
So let's transition more local, since we are recording this in film, or with Film Tampa Bay, but in Tampa Bay. That's what I meant to say. We're about as far away from Hollywood as you can geographically get in the U.S., and yet I'm sitting across from 2 very talented actors. How do you go about getting cast in Tampa, Florida, or St. Petersburg for not just a studio film, but a tentpole franchise studio film? What does that process look like? How do you even get the call?
Well, I got the call from my agent. Can you put yourself on tape for this? And really, it was 2 small scenes. And lucky for me, at this junction, the good news for actors in the U.S., and I'm assuming everywhere else, is that now we have a thing called self-tape. And self-tape, if you have the capability, a camera, you have cameras on your phone. If you have lights in your house. If you have decent sound, doesn't have to be the best, but it's not the leaf blower outside.
Yeah.
And you've got a backdrop that is solid, a solid backdrop. You can either go to someone or you can do it yourself with a friend reading opposite you. If you master certain things, and then you can submit the tape. So thank goodness we have that capability now. And over the past many years, it's getting to that point where now we have become, we meaning actors here in Tampa Bay, have become, or even in Florida or even in the Southeast, a little bit more proficient in submitting ourselves with quality tape.
Yeah.
Quality work.
In your case, again, we can't say too much about your character, but how much are you told in advance for your read through for the audition? I mean, do you get any backstory at all, or here's 2 pages and read them cold?
So sometimes this was very similar to Hunger Games, in that there's limited information I get. This is what you're playing. Well, I don't know. It's either the occultist or the witch and I think it was a no-name project.
Uh-huh.
I think mine, the first time it was a no-name. Same with Hunger Games. It was
well, they changed you. You weren't the
things.
occultist up front. You were
right.
the witch up front.
I was the witch up front, and so I thought, oh, a witch? And that witch, she was, she looks like a teacher, but then she morphs into something else, and then she blah, blah, blah. And I think, like, what on earth? It was very confusing not having, not reading the script, reading 3 pages, which, and with a lot more action than dialogue. Wow. So for both of them. So you also have to be not careful, but you have to understand what reads on camera within your frame. What can you do within your frame to make things look believable and just keep the attention on you, not have anything else pull focus. So that is important to know when you're doing a self-tape. And if actors don't know that, they should go to someone like Paul or me, not selling our services here, but I am.
Just telling, not selling.
So who know what works and what will pull focus from that.
Yeah. And Paul, if people haven't put it together yet, your brother's Patrick Wilson, who's been a part of...
Are you sure about that?
Well, DNA tests might
My
prove otherwise.
mother has told me for a long time I'm related to him.
Which, for those who've watched
he's the great Patrick Wilson.
I will
my
agree
favorite
with
actor.
That. He is fantastic. From Hard Candy on, every movie he shows
Everyone
up in.
goes there.
But it's so good.
It's so jarring.
It is.
Be careful if you watch that.
But it's an underserved movie. Like, more people should watch that. But that's not what we're here for.
Okay.
Why I brought that up is, I think most people are like, oh, well, his brother made a phone call. He didn't even know you were reading for this.
No,
role.
that's actually, that's a good example. Not unlike what she's saying. And I think in a lot of ways, certainly maybe one of because I'm a bit of an optimist in the sense that I think the pandemic has created more of a reliance on shoot your own video, submit your own stuff, wherever you are. Talent exists now around the world. Don't feel like as an artist or an actor that I'm in Dade City. I'll never get a shot. No. It's everywhere now, thanks to this kind of wonderful housing and maybe the pandemic I had a Hollywood agent who's like, you've got to be in LA. I'm like, I ain't going to LA. And next thing you know, I dropped him. And next thing you know, I get this call from a friend of mine who said, hey, they're shooting Conjuring. So I call my little brother. I'm like, hey, so what's going on? He's like, so I got this house and we got like a canoe, a couple canoes, and you should bring the kids up here. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, we're doing Conjuring 3 like in June 2 years ago. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Okay. Talk to you later. Call my agent. I'm like, what are you doing? Here's what you're going to do. You're going to get me a read. I don't care what it is. I don't care. It'd be fun. I could probably hang out with him. And shack up in one of his, rooms in his, whatever cool house. And so I get 3 auditions, 3 sides. So the sides, if people that don't know this, are just like she said, limited information. You don't know where it fits. And if you're really lucky, you might get the actual page numbers. So I always look at the page number and go, 28. 28's after the first act or right about the end of the first act. Okay, so that's a pivot point. That's something. That doesn't happen a lot. But in my sense, I had them and I was like, there's this one character, this other character, this other character. And this one character had like a great scene. And I'm like, oh, that's a prison chaplain. I could do that. And I worked for 3 days on that. And then the next one was like some cop or something. I was like, that's a cool character. Worked for a little bit. And then the last one was one scene. I'm like, turn the first 2 in. Call the agent. I'm like, there you go. He's like, what happened to the other guy? I'm like, no, the other guy's name is Earl, and I'm not doing Earl. I don't even look like Earl. And, it's one line. I mean, candidly, I could like bully my little brother for one line.
Yeah.
And, I mean, politely. Politely,
you just
I am the older brother. So it's like, let's see if, and of course he's like, agent's like, just do it. I'm like, fine, I'll do it. So I did it. And then I get a call. We want you for Carl. Called Patrick. I'm like, hey, do you have your script? He's like, what script? My Conjuring 3 script. Your whatever, It's like, who's Carl? Carl? Wait, you're sending me Earl. You just sent me Earl. This script, there's no one in this script named Earl. You just read for Earl, and there's no one named Ted. And then he goes, wait a minute. Ted is Ed. I'm Ed. Earl is Carl. They changed the names in the script. Oh my God, you're the dad. Oh my God, I'll call you back. So it had already kind of circulated, and it was kind of cute. As I like to say to a lot of actors, like, you never know who's watching, but don't skip over. Because, although I think at the end of the day, it was for me, it was really fun to have scenes with Patrick and, as the dad. But that was the one that I was like, I don't want to do that. And then that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You can't limp across the finish line, because you never know.
So staying there with that for a second, you've acted across from your brother before in Big Stone Gap. Actually,
Yes.
Dad was in that as well.
Oh,
is
yes.
there, just curious, because you're acting across from a sibling, is there any actual actor rivalry in those scenes?
Yes.
Do you try to one up each other?
Hell yes, there is. In fact, I remember, I can tell you this in Big Stone Gap, and if you're watching, this is true. Patrick didn't have his accent down for Big Stone Gap. And I kind of had mine. Because Big Stone Gap, Virginia, is about this big. And Appalachia, which I think a lot of people know as the place of the coal mining area, is 5 miles away. I mean, it's the same area.
Yeah.
So there's a different sound up there. And the movie was wonderfully written, and was a book shot in the eponymous town that my dad grew up in. So, and by the way, that means every summer for us as kids, running up and down the creeks and pulling snakes and crawdads out for 20 years. So when it was a chance to go back to Big Stone Gap, I remember Patrick going, I got to figure out my accent. I'm like, I got mine. Let's hear yours. And then that was fun, and then all of a sudden, I think I ordered moonshine from somebody across the creek, who then came over and was like, there's your voice, but even on Conjuring, there was a moment when, and Patrick's great like this. I mean, what a great thinking man's actor, who I think looks at not just the part from a male standpoint, but okay, so I'm this guy, but how does it fit with all these other people? And then how do I, a really beautiful kind of sensibility as an artist. And I remember we had this conversation, so, and we're staying in the same house. He's like, so tomorrow's your day. I'm like, you watch. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to stay up all night because I know what I got to do. So I'm going to get emotionally available, which I think is a really key for actors. And I don't recommend what I did for a lot of people, but for me, it was a lot of fun. And I'll never forget the moment that we didn't use this take, I don't think, in the final cut, where I kind of had a very emotional moment. And Patrick's in my eye line. And then he got emotional too. And that was kind of my, gotcha. We're there.
That's a great story.
I
made you break, bro.
Yeah.
So, Eugenie, you mentioned that when you got your sides, there was a lot of action to it and not a lot of dialogue as far as the first read through. You started out as a model.
I did.
How has that informed you in your career? I mean, just in the way you move and your presence. I mean, it has to be a big part of what it means to inhabit a character.
Well, let's just, let me add to that. I graduated in corporate finance and then became a model.
Which is also a long, strange road.
Yeah. So, but that's pretty simple. The stature, the way she carries herself, the way she engages. And I think by the mere fact that I am who I am, I mean, I'm 6'1", I'm thin, I'm angular, and that comes with the territory. And I own that. And through the years, in fact, for some reason, I feel myself blushing because I'm talking about this. My face is getting red.
You're doing good.
Am I? It's
because the air conditioning's off.
Doing great.
Anyway, but I think that's really influenced my characters. And the fact of this background and, working in Paris and Germany on the runway.
Yeah.
So really fun. Really, really fun.
So we've been gabbing for way too long at this point. We got to start wrapping it up.
Can we still go?
I
for
do
a
want to
little more,
mention.
maybe?
Okay, please.
Or maybe next time. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
You can pitch
For some reason, as I get older, the roles become a little bit more physically. I don't want to say physically demanding, but there are things within the audition that are more physically demanding. And the last one, even though we're not talking about Fear of Rain, but that audition, I mean, I had to go through in the audition an entire fight sequence, which, how do you do that in your tiny self-tape room?
Yeah.
So,
well, that's actually an interesting point.
Let's
Let's stick with that for a few seconds. We can burn a couple more minutes here. How does an actor audition for a physical scene in a tape? I mean, do you just get someone to fight you on camera? I mean, what do you do?
No,
you got to choreograph it yourself almost.
Exactly. You've got to choreograph it, and you have to have a bestie there really telling you, looking in the frame, saying, okay, this works, this doesn't work. But when you've got other people in the scene, like for Fear of Rain, even though we're talking about The Conjuring, but for that, there were 3 people in the scene, so Israel, Madison, and I had to, and they were at different points, and you can't turn around, and you can't, pick things up from the ground. You have to stay in frame.
Yeah.
So there was an hour of working with my pal, Mary Rachel, to figure out, well, does
Also
that look
a great Tampa Bay
believable?
actor.
Yes,
Yeah.
unbelievable. So does that work okay? I mean, when am I supposed to be saying that line? Oh, I'm supposed to be looking over there and saying that. Oops. Having a breakdown and picking yourself back up for 5 minutes and going, okay, you got this. Okay. So that's half of it. And then now what am I supposed to, I'm supposed to kick him? Oh, he's supposed to be grabbing me around the neck and choking me. Oh, and then I'm supposed to be trying to stab him with a knife. Oh my gosh, all these things in a scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
So
lot.
it's tough. But, the good news is you don't film that self-tape in a full body shot unless requested. It's usually, mid-chest up.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of things that are under frame that you can cheat that seem awkward to the novice. But if you're an actor that's been doing this, you go, oh yeah, no, totally cheating. You're totally cheating on camera.
Yeah. And since we're recording this in Tampa Bay, and as we're winding this up, if you are a local actor and you are interested in learning a little more, Eugenie, where can they go?
They can go to Station 12 Studio. And that's where I'll be teaching in-person classes at Greenlight Cinema.
Which is awesome. It's a great venue to support locally.
Yes.
Support your art house cinema folks. But also sign up for some of
do.
Eugenie's classes. And, we'll see you at the movies. But before we wrap, I do want to plug the movie one more time. So Conjuring 3. You've
Conjuring
been listening
3. The devil
to,
made me do
The
it.
devil
Eugenie
made me.
Bondurant and Paul Wilson. And when is it coming out, buddy?
So worldwide, well, actually last night it was in UK. So worldwide, June 4th, next
3, 4,
Friday,
4,
and on
4.
HBO Max.
HBO Max.
Go
yes.
see it in the theater, by the way.
Go see it in the
if you
theater,
all are
really.
comfortable,
And
if
don't
you're
see it alone.
vaccinated,
Yeah.
go see
Yeah.
it in the theater.
And by the way,
Go with
we
a buddy.
did talk to AMC, and they're not, if you're vaccinated, you're cool. They're not making everyone wear masks. So I think we're now domestically like almost 80% theaters. So
This is good. We need
yeah.
to support our theaters. So guys, please come out and see it in a theater.
And horror movies are only properly seen in a theater
Exactly.
with someone next to you to jump at the scares.
with great sound and great darkness and just the feeling of, I don't want to be alone for this.
Well, thank you guys so much for sitting down
Thank
with
you.
me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening. I'm Tyler Martinolich, and you've been listening to the Loose Framing Podcast. Tune in next time. Thanks. So welcome back. We just wrapped our interview with Eugenie Bondurant and Paul Wilson. That was a lot of good stories there.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I got goosebumps when Paul was telling us his ghost story on set.
There was some cool things. They were telling us offline about the holy water, which I thought was a cool little wrap gift. I've been on a lot of film sets, but I've never gotten holy water as a wrap gift before.
Could you imagine?
That's kind of cool.
Huh.
Yeah. So I think there was some cool takeaways there. I mean, here we have, two friends of ours that are immensely talented people in their own right. And I can't undersell that enough. Like they are just really good, genuine people, but very talented people.
Established in their
own right. Yeah. I mean, Eugenie had a wonderful modeling career, BA in finance. Paul has been a well-known branding and marketing guy in our neck of the woods for a long time. And they've both hit their stride a little later into life. And they have really big projects coming up and things that have shot here in Tampa Bay, like Fear of Rain.
Yeah. I'm really glad that Eugenie brought that up, because Fear of Rain, she was a big part of that. And that was really successful. It was all shot here in Tampa. And it was really cool when we were diving into how the audition process has moved into purely digital and purely self-taping. When she was auditioning for Fear of Rain, she had to choreograph her own stabbings. And that's insane. It seemed really intense.
It was interesting. And I should have plugged this when we were talking about during the interview. But if you're interested in watching Fear of Rain, it is streaming right now on Amazon Prime. Definitely go do that. If for no other reason, obviously you can see Eugenie, who did a wonderful job. I won't spoil who she is in the movie, but it's really cool if you're from Tampa Bay just to see Tampa Bay on film.
Yes, you will watch that and be like, I know that place. I've driven there.
So it's one of those. Some final thoughts before we wrap things up here. I asked both of them during the interview what scares them in a horror movie. What scares you, Jessie Brock?
What scares me is when stuff feels real.
What does that mean?
Yeah, where you're like, oh, this could have been my neighbor. I don't know.
So like you identify with something that's happening on the screen. Like, I could have been that murder victim.
Exactly. Yes. Or where you see somebody on the street and you automatically are thinking of a scene in a movie like, oh, that's going to be me.
I will tell you, my wife hates watching horror movies with me because I am not scared of anything. And I'm not saying that to brag. Like, I am just deadpan serious watching.
Big flex.
Just nothing, right? Like, but I've been on plenty of horror sets. I consume so much horror content.
Right.
And I think it's, I know a lot of people can
you know how it's made.
I know how it's made. Yeah. I was going to say, like, a lot of people can pull themselves out of that, but I sit there, it's like, I know it's coming up. And I'll lean over to her. It's like, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
2 seconds later, it happens. Never fails. So I think I've ruined horror movies for myself, yet I watch them.
It's hard once you make a movie and then you watch other movies, regardless of the genre. I mean, I'll look through and I'll be like, oh, must have cost them this much, when I'm watching with my friends. And they're like, we can't watch movies with you.
I just turned it into a guessing game for me where I try to figure out what's going to happen next. And I call it like Babe Ruth, like, here's the shot. Just watch.
And then it happens.
And it happens every time. Where can people find us, Jessie Brock?
Where can people find this? It premieres June 4th.
That was The Conjuring. I just set you up for a social media plug.
Oh,
and you didn't pick that up and drop
it. We can cut this.
No.
It's okay.
This is all live. That ball just sailed right past your shoulder. So,
that went way over my head.
Take two. Okay. Where can people find us, Jessie Brock?
They can find this on filmtampabay.com or at Film Tampa Bay on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Yeah. And all of the adjacent podcast places. So whether it's
anywhere
Spotify,
you can find a podcast.
iTunes, follow us obviously on YouTube. If you're watching this on video, you know where you found it. But people can look forward to this going forward for the next couple of months. And if you guys like it, please comment below, subscribe, do all the things, hit that like button or whatever the hell they say in social posts. But feedback's really important to us. So if you want to see different guests, if there's someone locally or there's a production coming up or a production company you think we should highlight, tell us and we'll jump on that.
We've used feedback. We got feedback for photographers and then we did a huge series on them. So, feedback's important. We listen.
We do listen and we try to accommodate it as best we can. So if you find this interesting, please let us know. If you don't find this interesting, don't leave a comment. We're not interested in knowing that. No, we definitely are. So anyway, we can improve this, let us know. But yeah, follow us. And if you're not following us on social media, you should anyway for all kinds of news and tips and things happening in Tampa Bay. Yeah. So with that, until next time, you've been watching the Loose Framing Podcast. I'm Tyler Martinolich, Film Commissioner for Hillsborough County, and I'm
Jessie Brock, Marketing Manager for Film Tampa Bay.
in Tampa Bay. Thanks, guys. Until next time. It's a wrap.
I'll get better.
All right.
I'll get better.
Cool.
Time heals all wounds.
Jens, thank you so much.